Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this webinar, which is being organized by Birdwatchers Society, a group which is based out of Kolkata. Today, the topic of our webinar is Harriers in Time and Space, Indicators of Critical Habitats in India. And the speaker is Dr. T. Ganesh, who is the Senior Fellow at the Center for Biodiversity Conservation at ATRI, Bangalore. ATRI stands for Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and the Environment. And my name is Sarala Kaling, and I also work for ATRI. So TG is a long-time friend and a colleague also. So I'm really very happy that he's with us to talk about his work on Harriers. As an introduction, Dr. Ganesh is a scientist with ATRI Bangalore, and his interests are basically to know how trees, birds, and other animals, they respond to seasons, and what would be the results of this in a changing world, in a world which is changing in terms of land use, in terms of climate change, and other changes. And he's currently working on migrant harriers, very interesting work, because of which I requested him to share his experience, his knowledge, his information, whatever he has, to all the enthusiastic birders that we have with us today. And he's trying to understand their migration and how their populations are changing, and the most important thing, which will be of interest to all of y'all, is how to involve citizens in the conservation of these harriers. In addition to that, TG, as we call him, has been working in the Kalakadman Tiger Reserve for more than 20 years. And he's also a very keen birder, and he's also very widely traveled in North Bengal as well as in Northeast India. And this work which he's been doing is not something which he started 4 or 5 years ago. He's been monitoring, I think, Harriers since the 1990s. And I think these birds are very, very important because they are birds that prefer critical habitats like grasslands, marshes, and open countries, which to the government, to many of for development is supposed to be wasteland. So develop them into some, infrastructure or whatever. But these are birds which indicate the status of these habitats which are really not given priority, but which we may lose in the coming years at the way development is happening. So before I hand this over to TG, just some house rules. I would request everyone, please mute your microphones. Please mute your microphones so that, this background noise doesn't come when the speaker is speaking. And with that, we'll have if you have questions, then we have the chat box. So you can put your questions there. And in the question and answer session, I will call out the questions, and TG will be able to interact with you and answer them. Okay. So with this, I hand this over to TG, Dr. Ganesh. Over to you, TG.
Yeah, thank you, Sarla. And thank you for the very interesting introduction, not only to me, also to Harriers. So you have done part of my job. And also, Society, Calcutta, to invite me to give this talk. I'm extremely excited about sharing this information on Harriers to the audience, but the Harriers that I'm going to talk today is largely from the western part of India, not so much from the eastern side. But anyway, this would give you some idea what's happening to, I call them as wandering nomads, because they're everywhere sometimes and then they're all gone somewhere. So we really don't know what's happening to them, where are they going, what kind of space or habitat they are using. So that is what my whole work and talk is going to be today. Saturday evening, the weekend, but most of us have to be at home. So I think this is good spending time at home. I hope so, and I hope that I don't bore you too much with the technical stuff, because I heard that many people are enthusiastic bird watchers. But yeah. So I will try to keep it as simple as possible, and you can ask any questions you want.
Please charge.
In chat box, you can talk to me after the talk, as the moderators have said. So this is what I've titled: The Wandering Nomads of Our Grasslands. How the population of Harriers changes over space and time, and in the process, we are hoping to identify some of the critical habitats that they require in India. So my talk is sort of organized in the following way. I give a very introduction of Harriers, because some of you who may not be aware what Harriers are or what their uniqueness is. And then I look at some of the trends in Harriers in India and to some extent globally. And then go on to look at some of the ecological and monitoring work that we have been doing, or we have made a couple of years back. And finally, I end up with how do we involve people like you, people, citizens of the country, naturalists, in trying to understand Harriers in terms of their behavior and terms of the habitat requirement, and finally in their conservation. So let me start with some of the spectacular behaviors that Harriers are known. And one of them is what's called as the foot pass. And foot pass is a behavior that we don't see in India. It happens in the breeding areas of the Harriers, mostly in the temperate regions. And what happens is the male bird pass food to the female bird in midair over the nesting area during the breeding season. The prey develops to the ground. It's picked up by the Harriers in the talons. They are carried to their nest. So invariably in Harriers, the male bird forages most of the time. The female birds incubates the eggs, and once the eggs hatch and then the nestlings come out, both of them help in foraging. So even then, you have these male passing their food to the females. So the other thing which we witness in the more often is the what's called as milling. Milling is a spectacular phenomena. If some of you would have seen Harriers in the evening, would have noticed these huge numbers that could vary from hundreds to thousands congregate over a grassland just before roosting. And this has become a very spectacular sight indeed for parts of especially Western India. And it was quite common in parts of Deccan and also in South India, but as I wish you, numbers have come down. So this spectacle, as what is known, is no longer a spectacle in many parts of the parts. So this is called a milling, another very unique behavior of Harriers. And as you know, Harriers roost, they breed, and they forage in grassland habitats. And India is fortunate to have one of the largest Harrier roost in the world. It's in the Velavdar National Park in Gujarat. I'm sure some of you would have visited it. And the picture you see is Velavdar, but it's another place in Rajasthan. It's called the Thar Chapar Wildlife Sanctuary. So I'll just quickly run through what does for a day. That is a 12-hour day period. Most of the foraging happens for 3 to 4 hours in the morning. As soon as they get out of the roost, they don't forage. They rest for a while and then they start foraging. But the very interesting stuff is most of the birds is that as soon as dawn breaks, the harriers leave their roost and move far away from it. So they're no longer seen near the roost once you come a little late. So that is a kind of an anti-predatory strategy that they have. They move away, maybe 500 meters away, sit on the grassland or just a mound of earth or something. So the foraging starts about half an hour to 1 hour after they leave the roost, and they forage for about 3 to 4 hours in the morning, and they rest during the hot part of the day, because most of the harrier habitats, the temperatures are quite high during midday. So there is what is called as the heat stress on harriers, which is considered why they don't forage all through the day, and keep their foraging to mornings, and again say about 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the evening. So when just before roosting, all harriers do what is called as a pre-roosting behavior. That is, as you can see in the picture in the middle, or the picture on the left, you can see the resting harrier is a single tree. Even though they are grassland birds, they require these shrubs and bushes to rest during the day. Pre-roosting happens just before the milling, which would be about, it could be as early as 1 hour before sunset or 1 hour before roost. And the milling usually happens after sunset. So it's about 5 minutes or even a couple of minutes before they finally settle down. So this is the general uh, behavior of a harrier over a day. This is just to tell you what it does. It's a well-known fact. And okay, now we're coming to uh, okay. So globally, if you look at harriers, we have 16 species. 6 of them are found in India, and most of them are grassland species. There are a few harriers that do nest on trees and they forage among trees. But most of them prefer grasslands, either temperate grasslands or tropical grasslands. And this is, I don't want to confuse you with this cluster diagram, but basically a lot of genetics works have been done on these species. They're supposed to have evolved from the forest raptors, especially the goshawks, the sparrowhawks, the shikras that we commonly see. And 3.5 to 4 million years back, at this time when grasslands also started coming out, and along with the grassland there was an explosion of, and that is the reason when, to sort of exploit that niche, some of these birds start moving into the grasslands and sort of evolved into 16 odd species of harriers. But the interesting stuff here is there's two groups called the steppe harriers and the marsh harriers. And now the steppe harriers, as the name suggests, would be probably found in the steppes. But there is a larger group of marsh harriers which are found in marshlands. But there is one exception, which you might see if you see my pointer here, is the Montagu harrier, which a very, very grassland bird. One could call it a steppe harrier, but phylogenetically, it is very close to the marsh. So for a long time, people thought Montagu harrier is a steppe harrier, but after this genetic work was done, it is not allowed. A lot of behavior of Montagu harriers are very similar to marsh harriers. Okay, so ecosystem service providers. As you can see, this is the work done in Velavadar in Gujarat. But who studied harriers in India for some time with the BNHs in 1992, or a little earlier than that, and he estimated about 2.5 million about 1,000 harriers in that place. So you can imagine the benefits that the farmers get from these birds. So there's always and when we ask the farmers in Velavadar, they said yes, we donate because the harriers are there. They take care of the grasshoppers that come to their jowar and cotton crops. So they are very important providers of ecosystem services. Um, so if you look at all the 16 odd species of Harriers, if you look at the trends, global trends, of course, not many are listed as endangered or threatened. Only those species that are in that category. But 10 out of the 16 species are considered, out of which 4 of them are in India, are found in India. So there is a concern here, but this is a global concern. And what's happening in India, if you look at it, there's one thing that I've added here is a lot of work has been done on Harriers since the mid 80s, especially Harriers coming to the western parts and the Deccan region. So we have a fairly a robust data set that is available right from the mid 80s to now. And these largely concerns with counts, the number of counts of Harriers. So the one on the topmost, the Velavadar, on the left-hand side is the Velavadar National Park I mentioned earlier. You see a decline. Then you come to the Deccan, which is a non-busted area. Again, this seems to be a decline. Alwal is near in Telangana now, which I was monitoring sometime in the 80s, and it was a very general decline, but subsequently the entire roost was lost. The Rolapadu, which is in Andhra Pradesh, was considered the second largest roost site in the world after Velavadar. So you had roughly about 1,000 odd areas in 1989 and 1990. But today, when you go there, you see much less than 100. There's a very sharp drop in Rolapadu. And in general, we see the Deccan region. Deccan has an extensive dry grasslands. We see a fairly significant drop in the last about 30 years. And this drop seems to continue even now. We did a quick write-up on this, Nadia, and we also compared whether the drop is both inside protected areas, outside protected area. There seems to be a fairly general trend of decline. So there seems to be that there is a decline of Harrier numbers in India across 30 years. So the other thing that sort of substantiates this information came the State of India Birds report that was released in the COP meeting last year. And we see, this is one thing that I want to add here before going to this, is that the previous information I gave you were of total number of Harriers. The literature we had did not distinguish the species there, but information from the State of India Birds, which uses eBird data, compilation of eBird data, shows a species level decline of the Montagu Harriers, and then you have the Harriers and the Western Marsh Harriers. So the Western Marsh Harrier, in fact, had increased in the middle, and then it seems to be declining recently. So these are the 3 species of Harriers that is sorry, listed in the State of India's birds. But the other species, we still have 3 other species: the hen harrier, the pied harrier that's found in the eastern India, eastern harrier also in eastern India. We have very little information. So the question that we were asking was why are they declining? And how do we answer this question is what has been the whole project, what we started as Harrier Watch. And to understand any decline, we need to know the full cycle of a species. And for a migrant bird, you need to know the life cycle of a the migratory species. So the life cycle would start from breeding, then they spend considerable time migration, autumn migration, then the wintering areas, and then they go back to the breeding area during through the spring migration. So all these four important stages in a migratory species are critical. But often what happens, especially in the wintering areas or in tropics, you have people studying the ecology of the species. And the same thing happens in the breeding areas where a lot of effort is put in studying the nesting behavior and things like that. So if you look at literature of migratory species, you see that there is a disproportionate amount of studies that is being done on the breeding areas of many of the migrant species, but very little during the or even during the wintering areas. So all these four are very, very critical, and often it's not possible to do all this. But of late, this has been possible, and that is what we have been trying to do with this program, which is now being hosted in Adri as a Harrier Watch. This is the website. You want to have more information about Harriers, what we do, etc. You can always go into this. But I will give you a brief summary of what we are doing to give you some idea of how this work is progressing. So the first thing to study a species like this, which has the uh, sometimes transcontinental migration, is to track them. And tracking birds has been very difficult in the past, but now thanks to the technology, we are able to track most of the migrant species across the world. And this is a massive effort that's going across the globe. And we have dedicated satellites that are meant to track globally. So the first thing was to track birds, and then to look at its full cycle, annual cycle, and do ecological studies, detailed ecological studies, both in wintering and breeding, and then monitor their population to see how they are how they are changing. If there's been a decline arrested, what conservation put in, where, sorry, where to put in, etc. So I will go through these in little detail, not so much. You can ask me questions later on. So how did we do this is sites, known sites of Harriers across India, uh, ranging from Rajasthan in the northwest, Gujarat, Maharashtra, then down to Karnataka and Tamil Nadu, Andhra Pradesh and Tamil Nadu. So we had this series of sites where we measured several things, but mainly at two levels, one at the individual level and another at the individual level. We used GPS and satellite tags, and at the population level, we used roost counts, apart from many other ecological parameters. So let me go with the first thing is tracking birds. Tracking birds is very exciting, but more than tracking birds, it's catching and tagging them is quite a process. So this is what we generally do. We go to the site, we then we set up a net, a mist net, a specialized mist net, about away from the roost so that the birds don't get disturbed. And we usually set it up in the evenings, and we remove the net before it becomes dark, so we don't leave the net at the site. So this is a short window of trapping, just about 2 hours in the evening. And so when we trap the bird, we fix these transmitters as a backpack. As you can see, one here fixed on a female Montagu. in Thalchapur, and then it's released in the morning. So this is some information from those tagged birds. So what we do in when we tag the birds is that, of course, it will have its own numerical numbers and all that, but we give it a very convenient name, and the name usually follows uh, protocol of where it is being trapped. So either it's a village name, a village close to the place you trap, or it's a sanctuary name, or things like that. So we called one of these birds Paruti. Paruti is it's called in Tamil it's called cotton, and because this was trapped right at the tip of southern India, you can see in the map, and we called it Paruti because this there was a very nice grassland in that area which was called Paritipadu, but unfortunately got lost. It was converted to an eucalyptus plantation. So in memory of that little grassland, we call this bird as Parati. It was a male Montagu Harrier, trapped in 2016, and so this is the track that it is given. It's one of the first birds we tagged, so it's been a fair amount of information. So you can see very clearly on the map that it's been following more or less the same route, both during autumn and spring, passing through Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Uzbekistan, Kyrgyzstan, and finally it's to Kazakhstan. It's a southeastern Kazakhstan. That's where they're supposed to be breeding, and the breeding site has been more or less the same each year. So this is basically passes through all the Khans, including our own Rajasthan. So when you look at these sites, so can you see any differences here? You can see that the one on top is, I would conveniently put it in somewhere in Rajasthan, and so is some in Pakistan, some in Kazakhstan. But if you are confused, um, I was confused when I saw these first, so I'm not surprised if you're confused. The one on top is where the Harriers breed. That's in Kazakhstan. And the one on the bottom is in Pakistan. The one on the right, bottom right, is in Rajasthan. So you can see a remarkable similarity in their habitats, the wintering habitats and the breeding habitats. This is very different from what the Montagu Harriers in Europe do, because Europe is much more greener when they go back in summer, which is not the case in the Kazakhstan. Kazakhstan is still quite hot and dry. So that is one thing, that's the similarity between these two wintering and breeding sites. The other thing that the tagged birds has given us information is about their foraging within the country. This is another harrier which we call as Gange, because it was caught in a place called Gangewadi near Solapur, and this was I think in sometime in November 2016, and this has again been a very regular bird coming to the same site again and again, whereas Parthi did not come back to the same site. It kept changing, but this Gange was very faithful to the same site. And what you see is the blue line, that is the Nanaj Bastard Sanctuary, and the black is the grassland area. And very, I don't know whether you can see clearly, but the Gange has been occupying a lot of areas outside sanctuary. And this is very important, because small sanctuaries, small grassland sanctuaries are not enough to actually provide the habitat for these long distance migrant species. Any other? I'll come back to Parati here. This is where we tag the bird, right as I told you, the tip of India. And this is the winter, the only one winter it spent there. And I don't know whether to call it unfortunate or fortunate, but it was a drought year. And so what happened, you can see these numbers indicate the number of roosts that kept changing during the winter of 2016, which is a drought. There was no northeast monsoon there, and there was very little grass cover and probably very little prey. So it kept shifting quite often between these six root sites, and most of these root sites are actually uh, very completely transformed grasslands. They are actually real estate plots or dry tank beds. So there's no regular grasslands in these sites. So I don't know whether it's what Pariti thought, but it never returned back to southern Tamil Nadu after that. The other interesting stuff that the tag birds have showed us is one on the left top is what we tagged recently. It's the bird is called Devani. Devani is again a village in Rajasthan, and the site that you see is unfortunately I didn't put the name there. It's a place in Madhya Pradesh near the town of Guna. This is what the green patch you see is all wheat fields, and so it was roosting in wheat fields, and it was foraging also in wheat fields. But interesting stuff here is we also had black bucks. There's a lot of coincidence between Montagu Harriers, Pallid Harriers, and black bucks. So wherever we see black bucks, we always tend to see Harriers roosting, at least foraging. So this sort of takes us back to the the whole idea whether these areas, which are currently wheat fields, were probably grasslands in the past. And because there is a lot of canal irrigation right now in that area, so there's enough water because there is a river flowing very close to it, and the water is coming out. It's pumped out of it, and there is a lot of water and there's a lot of wheat grown. So maybe there is some memory in the bird that brought it back here. So this is not just one season, but repeatedly we have been seeing that these birds come to the same site. Not only one bird, we had two birds coming to the. Shown on the bottom right is in Karnataka, very close to Hampi in Karnataka, which is, as you probably know, is a very dry area. It's excellent. But even there, they were roosting. Parati was roosting on harvested paddy fields. The harvested stubbles were there, but they were also growing some other crop there. But in between these crop, the birds were roosting. There is a black buck country, was a black buck country, was a cheetah country once, and probably again because of intensive agriculture, irrigated fields, these areas have been converted to paddy and wheat fields. So these are some of the interesting information a tag bird has given us. There is a lot, but I would not go into details about it. So let me come down to the population level monitoring. Uh, Population monitoring is a much more, field intensive stuff because you get a bird, can sit on in front of a computer and watch where it's going and stuff like that, and then you can download some satellite imagery and look at habitats and stuff. But population monitoring, because we want to see how many birds are there, not just one or two birds, and how do these population change over time. So we have these same sites. We visited them different seasons, right? Starting from autumn, winter, and then in spring. That means 3 times a year. I've been doing that since 2015. We continue to do that. So it's a pretty intensive stuff because just like Harriers, we keep jumping from roost to roost. And not only roost counts, we have also been looking at the prey base because I mean, The Montagu Harriers eats a lot of insects, especially grasshoppers, whereas the pallid Harriers takes in a lot of birds, a lot of insects, and also a lot of rodents. So we've been monitoring that apart from the climate and habitat. But I will give you just a short glimpse of some of the results. Uh, so, so here it's for the Montagu Harriers. I specifically look at Montagu male Harriers because it's, I mean, bird watchers will know that it's sometimes quite often difficult to distinguish male from female and female from juveniles. So there's a level of uncertainty there. So we may want to go Harriers here to see the trend, and not to worry too much about these graphs, just to say that Western India has a very large number of birds in autumn. Deccan has very little, and South India has quite a few. And as the season progresses, you can see that South India has most of the male Montagus coming to roost there. So this is an interesting observation because South India has very little grasslands, and but they are very important for these Montagu Harriers. I'll come to this a little later. This is one of the results that came out of this population level monitoring. So we also do a lot of roosting ecology study. Roosting ecology because we have seen, the Montagu Harriers. Remember, some of the forest watchers call them kabutar. They sit like a kabutar on the ground. So, which also means that they can be easily predated. We have a lot of predators apart from big raptors. We have the jungle cat, the fox, and many others. So what effect? So the other thing, we looked at pellets across these several sites, and very clearly you can see the dominance of bird in the diet, and also mammals, apart from grasshoppers and reptiles. So mammals and birds seems to be very important, and the one problem is we're not able to distinguish the species of Harriers here, which dropped the pellets because this was a mixed roost. So that's why we can't really say that the grasshoppers are Montagus and the bird is of pallid or marsh harrier. So that was a constraint there. And very interestingly, we also recorded several species of plants, I mean seeds of these plants. Many of them are crop plants, but also a lot of wild grasses. And this is a small sample from Thal Chapar, where the seeds are very small, given the size is about 1 to 2 mm. This was taken with a microscope. There were about 31 species of seeds that are just dispersed by Harriers. So rapid dispersal of seeds is well documented, but we have very little knowledge from what's happening in the wintering sites, especially in the tropics. This is an interesting, I mean, we didn't expect this, but this is something that came out of this work. So I'll come to the whole topic of conservation of grasslands, because the whole idea of monitoring Harriers is to see why they are declining and whether grassland loss or degradation could be one of the reasons. Well, the major aspect of grassland is conversion. There's a lot of, as I told you, why we named Paruthi is because this is the picture of Paruthipadu before it got converted to a plantation by the government. And this was a very extensive, large grasslands, over 1,000 hectares. And this was the largest patches in southern Tamil Nadu, which is gone today. And we used to have roughly about maximum of 70 to 80 Harriers roosting here. So all that is gone now. The other thing is about the dry agriculture that surrounds these grasslands. In many places, they use extensive pesticides. I can see this tractor being used. This is another important aspect, because in Rolapadu in Andhra Pradesh, I think about 10 or 15 years back, there was a lot of incidents of dead birds, which also include a lot of harriers, and all of this was at that point in time attributed to extensive use of such pesticides. So the other aspect is, of course, the real estate. As I told you, dry grasslands have become excellent place to set up homes, build real estates, and also build airports, build industries, and all of this because we still treat grasslands as wastelands in India. That's the policy issue there. In southern Tamil Nadu, and this is a picture of southern Tamil Nadu, the only grasslands that we get today uh, are just these abandoned real estates. You can see the plot stones and stuff like that. So this has been abandoned for some reason, and so the Harriers use these. So once these get converted into house plots, houses come up, we don't know what's going to happen. Uh, well, the other aspect is grazing. I mean, grazing as such is not a bad thing, because harriers are extremely tolerant species, and we have seen them in extremely short grass. But extensive grazing is what is completely degrades grasslands. It almost the bare soil is visible sometimes, and this does not go well with most of the grassland species, harriers also, and they don't roost in such very open areas. They need a little bit of grass. So overgrazing sometimes is an issue, and overgrazing is becoming a more common uh, because we don't have grasslands for these sheep to graze. They overgraze remaining grasslands that's left in that area. Of course, more recently, the development of these renewable structures. This is a place in near Rolapadu, place. At that point in time, it was considered Asia's largest solar farm, and it was one of the very extensive short dry grassland area next to the Rolapadu sanctuary, which is gone today. As mentioned, many grasslands across the country are being converted to agriculture. Of course, dryland agriculture was part of the system, but with increasing irrigation, we have wet agriculture happening, rice, banana, wheat, etc. So that's invading most of these grassland habitats. And of course, another renewable structure is the wind turbines that is coming up in several places, uh, especially in the Rajasthan. This is the one on the top left, is right on the migratory route of species. We know the effects on bustards, flamingos, and stuff like that. Um, uh, but Harriers pass through these, and so are the many other larger raptors. And the one on the bottom was a roost site of the Harrier, but these wind turbines have come and they've displaced. So these are the issues that is pretty much common across the dry grasslands in India. Just a quick look at how these land use has changed, how the grasslands have changed in southern Tamil Nadu. I talk about southern Tamil Nadu specifically because the water barriers, it's a very critical habitat, especially in the districts of Tirunelveli and Thoothukudi, which are known for dry grassland. They're also known to have harbored the cheetah, bustards, and floricans once upon a time, but they are not there anymore. So this is a image of 1992, and you see this is in 2014. So there's a dramatic change. So this has been happening because of a lot of irrigation structures that have come up, and grasslands have been converted to banana and paddy. So that's about in a very short, brief account of the work we're doing. But importantly, what we want to do is how do we involve people like you in this work? And we have some of the stuff that we have been trying out of late. One is looking at abundances of Harriers. This is through road transects where citizens can participate with their vehicles on designated roads across habitats to look at not just Harriers, but also other raptors. This has been a method that's been used extensively in many other countries, including tropical countries in Africa and stuff like that. So this has yielded a fairly robust information on the abundance of raptors. We have modified that uh, this little bit for Harriers because Harriers are low-flying birds, unlike bigger raptors. So very often we found that when you drive uh, through countryside, if there are some obstacles like a tree or a building or something, you often miss these birds, unlike the largest raptors. So we have modified this by combining it with point counts and road transects. This seems to be working well, and we want to try this out with involve a few people who would be interested in participating in such activities. The other one is using probably I will go it. Yeah, this is the road transect stuff. In habitats like this is in Rajasthan. I mean, you can easily drive distance and for a long distance on a car or a two-wheeler and record Harriers. But when it becomes a little wooded, as most parts of India are, this kind of straight road transects don't work. Um, so we've been doing, as part of the tagging work, also ringing. We use specialized rings. These are made specifically for Indian Harriers now. We import it from Europe. And these are numbered at I01 is India 01, India 02, 3, etc. like that. So whenever we tag birds, or even if sometimes the birds get caught when we don't tag the wings on the left leg, and the picture on the right is a photograph taken by one of our photographers, Mr. Nageshwar Rao in he found this bird after many days with the ring. So this is where photographers become very useful because you can sight these birds with their lenses from a distance, and we can find out the rings. This basically very useful in finding out where the Harriers are moving. The other thing is about prey analysis. As I mentioned, it's very difficult to record the complete prey spectrum of these species because is one thing is very hard to see these prey and what and pellets have their own limitations. They don't they underestimate sometimes the diet because some of the species like in amphibians they just get digested, they don't come out in pellets. So what we have started this work is to request photographers to send in pictures of Harriers preying on something. So this is, you can see, I think it's a grasshopper which is being about to be preyed on. You don't have to really take such spectacular pictures as taken by Sriram from Hyderabad. But even these pictures that I think one of us took in Thal Chopper, you could easily make out that it's carrying something on its leg, and with a little bit of effort, you can make out that it's a grasshopper. So these kind of pictures are very valuable for this work, and that is something that photographers can always help us with. We have requested many photographers. We have sent a lot of requests, and there's been a fairly good enthusiasm by many of them, and they've shared their pictures. So this is helping us, but this is an ongoing process, and we need more pictures. So putting together some of these pictures are very, don't get carried away by all these numbers and bars and stuff like that. It just shows you that the different kinds of, one is the diet, and more important than diet is the across seasons, how it has been changing. You also see some pictures taken in the non-migratory season, June, July, August. So there are some areas which stay back. It's called as oversummering. So maybe these are the birds which the photographers took picture of. The other factor which a lot of studies, I mean, a lot of photographers have been involved with is looking at mold patterns in birds. Generally, mold in birds are taken into consideration when you actually catch the birds. But using good photographs, as the one, this is highly molted marsh, see that you can easily distinguish the molting patterns in that, and also get what is called as a mold score from this. So actually catching the bird or doing any harm to the bird. So this was very, very useful. We've just about trying to start this work, and again, a lot of photographers can participate in this. So I'm coming to the end of it. So the Harrier Watch has its own website now. This is what we do. We have a lot of information on Harriers there, and also how you can help us participate in it. So like this, for instance, reciting of ringed Harriers and looking at diet of the species. So some of the things you can help Harrier watch and understanding the Harrier wintering behavior. So I end up with some kind of a nice feeling, and that is about grassland restoration, because we have lost grasslands and it's time we think of restoration. And one good example is this place called Thalchapar in Rajasthan. You would have sorry, gone there. This is it's a very small patch. It's about 6 square kilometers, and this was restored grasslands. It was completely covered with prosopis in I think in the late 90s, and the forest department removed these prosopis and now maintain it as a very good grassland. It's a well-known place for black bucks, teeming in that place everywhere. And so are harriers, so are many other birds known for its raptors. And this is right in the midst of several small villages around. And what has happened is that in 2008, there was a survey done on harriers. I think the graph is very self-explanatory there. There's a tremendous increase in harrier numbers in the last about 9 years. And this is all because the grassland has improved considerably because of active management department. So I leave it here because it just gives a nice feeling that not everything is lost, that there is still hope to conserve our grasslands and also conserve species dependent on them. So I would end there, and these are some of the so many people who have helped us with it. Of course, the Forest Department, Rajasthan, Gujarat, Maharashtra, Andhra Pradesh, Tamil Nadu, the IG Wildlife from MOEF considering giving us tagging permissions, Department of Science and Technology for supporting us, and the Harrier Watch team, of course, Prashant, Arjun, Saravanan, Devan, and Malay, who have been always with us in the field. And of course, there's one person who's missing here is Talwap, is Chia Amaragan, who has been the main person in trapping and catching harriers. And of course, Bharat Punyaji from Thalchapar, Aditya, Gafoor from Karnool, Rolapadu, and many others. And finally, of course, all of you, many photographers, naturalists, bird watchers, who have always been giving us plenty of information. And I still hope that they will keep coming. Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm ready to take any question, comments.
Thank you, TG, and sorry for those unpleasant interruptions, but I'm glad you could, complete your very, very interesting presentation. I think you can stop sharing your screen now, TG.
Okay.
And there are a lot of questions. We have about 20 minutes. So I would request you to keep your answers very brief. The first question is from Sanka Mishra. So he asks, any information about why Paruti did not return to the same wintering area? Did you?
That's a difficult question. One of the reason Harriers sometimes don't come back is that the past experience. So when they find a particular site has not been very good for them the previous year, so they don't. It's got it's got a spillover effect on them because if you have a very bad winter, they will have a very bad breeding as well, because in terms of energetic loss, stuff like that. And so that probably remains in that memory, and then they look for a different site. So I also want to add here that Parthi was an adult bird. It was not a juvenile bird. So we don't know which are the areas it came the previous years, whether it was earlier in Maharashtra and then came south or things like that. So there's always this uncertainty, but that could be one of the reasons why they don't. They have a memory of the past.
There's Krishnakant Bakshi who asks, like, while the other Harriers are either stable or decreasing, but Western Marsh Harrier is increasing. So what do you think is the reason behind this?
Well, Western Marsh Harrier is increasing because there has been a very good breeding nope, because there's a lot of conservation efforts that happened for Western Marsh Harriers, also with Montagu Harriers. But we really don't know where our Western Marsh Harriers are coming from, because we have no tag data on that. So the trend that you see is a global trend, and it's not related to India. And so in India, as you see from our own monitoring and also from the eBird data, there's marsh is declining. So we really don't know what's happening to the Indian Western Marsh Harriers.
Okay. So Rubin Sagar asks, do these Harriers roost in mixed communal roosts? Did you?
Yeah, they're mixed communal roosts, and that's why we're not be able to distinguish the pellets to the species. Yeah.
There's Umesh Mani who's asking, so you talked a lot about how these grasslands are getting changed, converted to other uses like cultivation or development activities everywhere. And this is one of the main reasons for decline of Harriers, as you said. So the question Umesh asks is, what are the conservation measures being pursued?
Well, I ended my talk with a positive note of looking at Thalchapar as a very good example of restoring grasslands. I think that effort has to be panned across India. There are still small patches of grasslands where such efforts, not necessarily by the forest department, it could be done by communities, it could be by local stakeholders like the pastoralist or local NGOs, and the district administration can take up. One such effort we are trying out in Tamil Nadu, southern Tamil Nadu, where we are trying to identify some of these grazing lands which are on government records, but the state of these lands are nobody knows. Nobody knows its extent. Nobody knows where it is. So we're trying to find out where they are, map them out, and see how we can restore them with the help of animal husbandry. Because animal husbandry is very interested in that, and so because they are used for grazing by sheep and stuff like that. So that is one approach that we think would be quite positive in the future. I hope I'll be able to answer the question.
Mr. Ashish Pitti has asked whether there has been an impact of GM crops on the habitat, genetically modified crops and their impacts on the Harrier habitats.
Yes, I mean, we didn't directly study the GM crop impacts, but what we saw in Veladar is that, I mean, our own observations are there on GM crops. We didn't see so many grasshoppers. We didn't see the Harriers in them. And more than that, when we talked to people around Veladar, they said that We don't use GM crops around the park because the Harrier are doing the work for us. So there is not much of pest attack, and so we prefer the native crop, cotton crop, and and the yield is also much better. So yeah, we don't have a direct study on it, but there seems to be that's not so much of a preferred habitat for Harriers.
Uh, there's someone, S. Bhatt, who's asked any study about Kutch grasslands, and how about bird watching scope about Harrier in Kutch?
We haven't started monitoring in Kutch, but we're planning to do in Bunny. Um, but yes, there's lots of records from Kutch. I mean, even last year, I think some people recorded about 200 Harriers there last winter. So Kutch is a very important area. I don't know whether you saw it on the map. Almost all of our the Montagu Harriers pass through Kutch, and it's a very important stopover points for them as soon as they come in the autumn from Pakistan, Balochistan, Afghanistan, to spend a lot of time in Kutch and then slowly move down. Yeah, Kutch is very important, but it needs a lot of attention. Yes.
There's Jitin Johnson. No, there's Suman Dasgupta. Mr. Suman Dasgupta, he asks, will wildlife tourism help to conserve the bird migration? Can tourism be used as one of the ways to, conserve its Harrier migration, basically?
It's a very, it's difficult to ask. Difficult to answer it in one point because, yeah, for instance, the Tal Chapar, uh, the forest department promotes a lot of tourism. I'm sure a lot of bird watchers would have gone there, the cameras and vehicles and stuff like that. And very often we have seen that when we do our observation, there are sometimes more vehicles than Harriers. So I'm not sure whether that's a good thing. But there are other things that happens with tourism is when it is not regulated in a grassland, people tend to drive through grasslands, as it happened in some of the grasslands around Bangalore. And this has a tremendous negative effect on it. It not only harms birds, it could destroy the nests of many of the species that are nesting there. And so cross-country driving in grassland is something which we should not promote as part of a tourism. But regulated tourism in grasslands is not it's not a bad idea.
Okay, Jitin Johnson asks, it's a nice initiative, the citizen science, to monitor migratory bird, but he also thinks apart from photos and pellet analysis, can meta barcoding be used to analyze prey groups from their pellets? And is there any other work going on in ATRI or by anyone else in India?
Yeah, metabarcoding is something that we're trying to do with we thought we'd do with the pellets, but now planning to do it with the poops, the droppings, and because that seems to be a better way of looking at the differentiation between species. One thing that's very straightforward with metabarcoding is that you can distinguish whether it came from a pallid harrier, or Montagu harrier, or marsh harrier. But for prey species, we still have to work out the details. But yes, we in ATRI are planning to do that very soon, maybe the next winter. Yeah.
Okay. We have quite a few questions, but I'm not going to, there are repeated questions from some people. So I'm going to just go on to people whose questions I haven't called out. So there is Amrita Kakka who asks, can participatory involvement of farmers play a role in diminishing some of the causes for the decline in Harriers? TG?
Yes, farmers. This is one thing I think we were planning in Rolapadu, because Rolapadu is surrounded by dryland agriculture, and a lot of farmers use pesticides, as I showed it in that picture. So there is an effort to make it more organic, at least within the whatever they want to demarcate as eco-sensitive zone around the park. And yeah, some encouragement in that area. but there requires a lot of convincing to use organic fertilizers and pesticides among the farmers. But this is an initiative that is to be collectively done with farmers and local NGOs and researchers and stuff like that. But yes, I think it can be done.
There's another question from Abhijit Jagtap, who asks, how do we conserve and sustain grasslands and biodiversity? And because we know that while many of these areas are also being used for large projects like solar, so is there any sustainable way that we know of? Like, it's a difficult question.
Yeah, I think there's a break in the middle, but I get it. Basically, how do we balance between the development and conservation here?
Yeah, sort of, because these areas are, again, very, they're looked upon as very important areas where you can set up these large solar power plants.
Yes, yeah. So, yeah, as correctly said, it's a difficult question, but we need the local support to do that. And because many of the large projects, they suddenly come up in these areas, they don't do local consultations at all. For instance, in the Gani solar project near Rolapad in Kurnool, the whole project came up very suddenly. We're not sure whether any environmental impact assessment has been done or has been done in a proper way. So that has to be done, and that has to involve local communities. And I'm sure there is going to be an opposition for most of it. And we'll have to, of course, we'll have to see how we have to balance there between the development and the needs. But I think local participation, local involvement in the decision making is very important in these grassland areas. We found that thing in Paratipadu also, because the locals sometimes were not receptive, largely because the grasslands were used by pastoralists. Pastoralists are very marginalized communities. They don't have any power, but the local farmers had a greater power, and they wanted a plantation there or something like that. So yeah, it is a very tricky thing, but I think the main thing is that we need to have a proper local involvement in those decisions.
Yeah. I think I'll just take one more last question. That is, again, this is because it involves Eastern India. I'm just going to ask it. It's by Mr. Sankam Mishra. What is the state of harriers in eastern side of India, and has any work been done in the eastern part of the country, basically?
Well, the only work that it comes to my mind is Gautam Narayan and Lisa Lomin's work on the pied harrier in the Manas National Park. This is a classic work many decades back when they found that the pied harriers do breed in India. But other than that, I think it's a big vacuum in Eastern India. We don't know. We know very little about pied harrier. We know very little about the Eastern Marsh Harrier. And as you can see from the eBird data, we have the trends only for the 3 species of harriers that's been mentioned. We have no clue about the hen harriers as well. So the other 3 species are, yeah, there's quite a bit of work can be done.
And following up on that, one more last one, I think I'll take this. Santanu Manna asks, so do you think the western part of Bengal is suitable for harriers? Do you have any study in these areas?
The western part, I didn't get it completely.
Do you think the western part of Bengal is suitable for harriers? Is suitable for harriers, and do you have any study in these areas?
Well, the western part of Bengal, I would imagine bordering Bihar and Jharkhand.
Yeah.
Yeah, so no, those are forested areas largely, or it's agriculture land. But Bihar has, I think, a fairly good number of pied harriers, maybe Eastern Marsh Harriers. But yeah, no work done. Those are open areas for people to go at and see what's happening.
Thank you, TG. I think you've had an exhaustive session with all these unpleasant interruptions. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, the audience. And in conclusion, I would like to invite Mr. Amitava, who's the member of Birdwatchers Society, Kolkata, to give his concluding remarks.
Yeah, Dr. Ganesh, thank you for this excellent session. Really liked the way in which you explained to us about Harriers and the challenges that we face in terms of their migration, in terms of their habitat. So thank you very much for that. For many of us, while we have photographed Harriers and have watched Harriers, but very rarely have we uh, in such a short, concise manner known about their habits and habitats. So I think 4 decades of Harrier watch and or watching Harriers is something phenomenal, and I think that's a huge achievement, and congratulations to you and your team at A3 who are working on this. And I also like to congratulate Harrier Watch for the kind of work that you all have done. With that, I would like to conclude from my side. Thanks once again. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Sarla. And
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sarala, for organizing. Thank you, Doctor, being patient with us.
Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
And please watch out for our other webinars. I think we are going to come up with some more interesting speakers on some interesting birds of Northeast this time.
Sure, definitely. Thank you, Sarla, for organizing it for me.
Thank you, everyone. And sorry about the unpleasant interruptions.
Okay.
Yeah, but those are learning in our SOPs.
Yes.
I think we will learn about all these and manage them in future.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, bye.
Okay, good night and stay safe, everyone.